Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of The Democratic View. I'm the hostess. My name is Phyllis Italiano, and I have with me today one of the most outspoken men who has put forth what may be the most important issue of the next 20 years, which is water. And can we drink our water? His name is Kevin McAllister, and he is the founder and president of Defend H2O, correct?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Phyllis. Thanks for having me.
Believe me, my pleasure, because as I have said, I am not sure that people understand when we talk about this thing called the sole source aquifer. I don't know that people really get what that means because they've heard it so often. But when Long Island was formed, it was a glacier that came down from North America, and as it came down, it was beginning to melt, but it picked up a lot of stuff. We call that moraine, that stuff that it was picking up as it slid down the continent, and it came around over to where we are right now and melted. As it melted, it left all that stuff called now terminal moraine, which became Long Island. And under our feet is what we have called the sole source aquifer. And Kevin is going to tell us something about the layers of the sole source aquifer.
Okay. The sole source aquifer, we, again, as an island, as you described, there is a finite amount of fresh water that sits beneath us. The upper layer of the aquifer is called the upper glacial. And then we go deeper into the magathy, and the very deep part, which is more of a, I believe, a lens, at least in our area, is the Lloyd aquifer. So these are very susceptible to land use practices, and we are seeing trends, increased nitrogen levels in both the upper glacial and magathy, which is our drinking water supply.
Yes, I think that's the key point, which is that the land and the water are together. They are tied up together. So what we do on the land will affect what happens to our water. And that includes our bays as well, and all of our the stuff that many of us make a living on in this area, what keeps us as a place that people want to come to. But we have some problems that are going on now that seem to get some vocal support, but in action, very little. So why don't you describe some of that to us?
Okay. As I identified nitrogen from household septic systems, as well as agriculture fertilizers, lawn fertilizers, they're building up in groundwater. I have an expression, where goes groundwater, there goes our bays. So inevitably that volume of groundwater will be moving towards streams, harbors, and open bays. And the enrichment of nutrients or nitrogen in those water bodies is principally the cause for triggering these algal blooms. Government in general, when I say government, I'm talking the state, county, local townships. I mean, we're all talking about water protection, but we do start to fall short at times of actually, I'll say, enforcing existing regulations and really stepping up with some of the necessary actions to provide that greater protection, because there is a crisis. I mean, it's a quiet crisis, but our drinking water is threatened, and clearly if you've been reading the press, virtually every pond, stream, open bay is exploding with these harmful algal blooms.
I get bulletins from the Suffolk County Health Department where they talk about, they'll say after a big storm, there'll be something like 68 places to swim, including that beautiful lake that I used to see as a child called Lake Ronkonkoma, which was a phenomenon in those days in the mid-50s, and you can't swim in them. You literally can't swim in them, because if you do, And some of them are so toxic with these algal blooms that they physically can affect your health.
Sure, public health risk.
Yes.
Again, virtually every water body is classified as impaired or degraded in the eyes of the state classification. You mentioned Ronkonkoma with the blue-green algae, Georgica, mill pond. I mean, the list is basically inclusive of every water body.
So one of the things that I had read recently was about new upgradings of places and the septic systems that they're using. You want to tell us that?
Sure. For decades now, we've used conventional systems. These are basic hydraulic systems that will be pitched. The pipe is pitched downhill out of the house into a settling tank, collect the solids, and then that will flow off into these leaching pools or cesspools. We know that the nitrogen is predominantly coming from our urine.
Okay. That's something people don't realize.
No, approximately 80 to 90% is
Yes.
from urine. So that's really where we need to focus on trying to address the problem, at least from the human source. So these conventional systems, again, they work in sandy soils. If it's not backing up, all's good. Well, over the many decades of development, the households, the population's increasing, and now we're seeing basically we've reached a tipping point where, again, the groundwater is enriched, threatening drinking water supplies, and then inevitably into the bays. I've been pushing for years for advanced treatment, these systems that will effectively denitrify, remove the nitrogen from wastewater before it's ultimately released into the groundwater. They are more costly, but there's actually systems on the horizon that are not costly and quite basic, and we need to start employing them without delay.
So when are they going to be really available? Because I've been waiting for that for so long, really.
Well, I will tell you, since June of 2005, I've been talking about advanced treatment because I informed myself in recognition that these coastal water bodies were exploding in algal blooms, principally from wastewater. And finally, Suffolk County is starting to approve some systems. The last couple of years have set up a process for approval. I don't think they go far enough, in my professional opinion. I think there's systems that are better that are out there, but they're not being embraced, perhaps because of cost. And let's hope, as I described, this one basic system that's on the horizon can do the job in a cost-effective manner.
I want it. How do I get
Yes.
it?
Well, Suffolk County's got to approve it, and it really is basic. It would be wastewater flowing through a mat of wood chips or sawdust, and that provides a carbon base. And ultimately, the chemical transformations and the activity of the bugs, the bacteria in the sediment, in the substrate, will effectively remove a great deal of nitrogen down to very low single digits. So what currently comes out of our pipes or out of our households is on the order of 50 to 60 parts, and we can get down to low single digits with the right technology.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. But it's going to take a long time to reverse. Number one, to institute these systems into households will be a very long process. And then let's keep in mind that the groundwater that's already enriched, the travel times are very slow to receiving waters. So, even if tomorrow every system was replaced, we've arrested the nitrogen load coming from households, the groundwater would have to move through and really purge itself. And that will take decades, but that's the reality of the situation we're in.
So we really have to begin to start this process rather quickly.
Absolutely. And, I have really, I'll say, been very vocal about what I call a contradiction on the part of the county. They have a practice of what they call grandfathering. So that is really acknowledging or recognizing prior flows at commercial properties. For instance, might be a restaurant that was accommodating, a certain patronage. Ultimately, they're looking to expand to a much larger restaurant, and the county's deferring to the conventional system that might have been in place since the 1970s, and saying, ultimately, you're good to go. And a more egregious example would be a old motel that was converted to a 23-unit condominium, substantial wastewater flow that exceeds the state regulations requiring advanced treatment, and they are being grandfathered to use conventional systems that do very little to denitrify.
And that's on Shinnecock Bay, near Shinnecock Bay.
That's correct,
And I will
yes.
tell you, because my daughter lives there, that I know that western part of Shinnecock Bay was closed for shellfishing.
There's, without getting into specific properties, I can think of, 4 or 5 within East Hampton town that this has happened in the last couple of years, these grandfathering approvals. The North Fork's dealing with it. It's happening throughout Suffolk County, and it's got to stop without any delay here.
I'm going to tell you about my daughter works, one of my daughters works at a restaurant in Watermill, and the county, she was getting sick sometimes when she was there. She kept thinking it was the food. And Suffolk County came in, the health department, and said they are not allowed to serve any water. This is in Watermill, that the water is contaminated in Watermill, in this whole area of where those stores are and stuff, right by the windmill. And the nail place there, they used bottled water for everything, including the towels that they put on people's feet and stuff for fear of contamination. So it is really, now what about the homes around there? Well, Suffolk County is not going into the homes, but the stores have been told, and the restaurant, that they can't serve their water.
In reality, we'll call it municipal water, the Suffolk County Water Authority, which is a quasi-government body. They've laid pipe for decades. Most of the households are on municipal water, or city water, county water, however we want to term it. But it does come from designated wells, and they are certainly do their job in ensuring that water is potable, it's safe to drink. In some instances, they've had to close these drinking water supply wells because of contamination moving through in the groundwater stream.
So, shades of Flint, Michigan is all I have to say. We are really, as you said in your earlier statements, in a real crisis.
The community, the public, has to be very vigilant, and I encourage public participation in the process. For instance, through my work and I'll say investigation into the state laws, numerous communications, both at a county level, a state level. I'm convinced that this grandfathering practice is unlawful, and I just wish there would be a sheriff that would stop it. And what I mean by a sheriff, we need the New York State to step up here, because clearly the county is not adhering to state regulations in this regard.
Wow. Is there anything we can do about the county getting? Should we be emailing Suffolk County, Steve Ballone?
Oh, absolutely. You're
Bridget Fleming?
Bridget Fleming, certainly as a legislator for the county, or town board. They need to really start to bring some pressure to bear on Suffolk County here to do away with grandfathering. And again, it goes on a lot, and people aren't really aware of this. And certainly not aware of the fact that I compel that it's unlawful. It's not a practice that's allowed by state regulations, and unless I'm proven otherwise, shown otherwise by the county, I'll continue to insist that it needs to end.
And we all know also that we have in our upcoming election in November, we have to once more, I guess, recertify the CPF fund.
Yes.
And now, because the truth of the matter is, we are beginning to run out of land to buy. There's still plenty, but if this is going to go on for the next 10 or 15 years, I don't know how long the recertification is for. I think it's 20 years. One of the things that they are putting into that is that 20% of that money, which is the transfer tax, when a place is sold, you have to put 2% into, this fund. And that 20% would be able to be used for water quality
improvements, correct.
Yeah, so that would mean particularly, I'm sure that those particular pieces of property where there are bordering on, bays and streams and stuff like that are going to be the first to be helped to change their septic systems.
Well, I have cautioned our leaders to be very thoughtful about the upgrades on these systems. We have to have a real strategy as to what areas, what zones, that, I'll call them hot spots that may be affecting a particular water body, as a neighborhood sitting in groundwater, to change these out in a very strategic way so there's a meaningful result to it. And not only the transition of these systems, but also stormwater improvements. You mentioned the beach closures. That's principally from stormwater runoff, loading these water bodies with high levels of bacterial contamination, thus closing the beaches. So the funds that are generated, that 20%, they're projecting at, I believe, $4.5 to $5 million per year that could go toward water protection. We have to be very thoughtful and very strategic about that, and not, certainly not waste the application of these, these limited funds in a manner that really doesn't have results.
So are you talking about something like the town forming, alas, another committee, but this committee that would sort of monitor what's going on?
Well, that's in the plans. I'll call it a vetting committee. Hopefully it includes scientists, technical people that understand the problems, as well as what the appropriate remedies are. There are certain technologies that can be applied. Of course, we talked about upgrading septic systems, but various tools for stormwater remediation or addressing other forms of pollutants, and to again be mindful that almost a check and balance to make sure that as we expend these dollars in this area, that it's being properly applied.
We had a CAC meeting last night in Springs, and Scott Wilson was there and talked about the land purchases that have been made by the town. For instance, land along Hog Creek has been bought up, so that there would be no development. And we're hoping that they will continue that kind of thing, because,
it's I won't call it a marathon any longer, because we do see the finish line in sight relative to the available land. So yes. I think if the town has some sprint left in them, this is a sprint to the line to ensure that we're acquiring every piece of property that we can, and even these small parcels that are on waterfront or in sensitive, wetland areas, they should be acquired. And, in some cases with the actual homes, if they're, let's say, abandoned homes, for instance, or you have the ability to actually raise that property, raise the home and convert it back into undeveloped land. That's a positive thing that needs to be pursued.
Yes, well, there's a place down by Maidstone Park where they did exactly that, and it's now back to its natural state.
Yeah, that's...
The homes have been taken away.
Sure.
No longer a septic system. I mean, it's just a marvel to think that, that the town has understood that this is the kind of thing they have to continue to work on.
Addition by subtraction, in essence, and That's a good thing. I mean, ultimately, if a residential parcel and what it contributes, relative nitrogen and, let's say, lawn chemicals to groundwater, ultimately to the harbors, if you can remove that from the equation, that's a net benefit.
I'm shaking my head at lawn chemicals. I really don't understand lawn chemicals. I really don't. Just cut it is my theory.
Well, unfortunately, we've trended toward the suburban lawn over the last 3, 4, 5 decades, and it's caught up to us now. And the natural landscapes are limited, and certainly the chemical inputs from lawn practices. I mean, my gosh, we have a herbicide or insecticide for everything that's out there now, and in the 1960s and 70s, these products or this level of management on someone's residential or home was unheard of.
It's just startling to realize that in 1950 there were only 250,000 people in Suffolk County. And I was in Suffolk County on the North Fork when I was a mere slip of a girl in the 50s, mid-50s. It was nothing but farms. Beautiful, lovely, open farms, and water that was, well, you could almost drink the salt water if you wanted to. It was just such an incredible place. And it's now, I think, 1.7 million in Suffolk County. So there has been a tremendous increase with very little done as far as how to keep the water clean so that we can continue to live here. And one of the things I think it's also up to people to really begin to understand that whatever you do in your house, affects the water, and maybe even what you're going to be drinking, because your well may, if you have a well, and I have a well, your well is not far from where you're dumping stuff, and I know I make sure that everything I use in my house, whether it's soap for the dishwasher, for the washing machine, anything that goes on the lawn, but nothing goes on the lawn except compost, is all the proper stuff, because I don't want to drink it, and I don't want to have anybody else drink anything that I have thrown into it, including medications. Matter of fact, I've interviewed some people here about the big red box, about getting rid of your disposal of your medications, bringing them to some different places where they will accept them. Even in the drugstores, White's drugstore accepts anything instead of throwing it into the toilet. So I think we all have to take a responsibility for what's happening. It's the land affects the water.
Great.
I know we had a tremendous rain, I think it was a week ago, where I could not believe the flooding that went on in East Hampton as I drove to the library. And I mean, it was like up over the wheels of cars. When I went to the library for a program and came out, it was all gone. And I kept saying to myself, where did all that dirty water go that washed up the streets? And where does
down into a catch basin, and there's a network of pipes. Ultimately, the catch basins will capture the water off the road, deliver it to a pipe system, and normally it's discharged into a nearby pond or open water body. More progressive treatment is actually what these dry wells that capture that water and then allow it to percolate slowly out into groundwater. So these are the improvements that additional funding would allow and provide for. So this is, the Community Preservation Fund water, as I call it. It's a very positive thing, and I hope, the residency of East Hampton will support it on the November ballot.
Oh, I'm pretty confident they will, because we all know what the CPF fund has done for our area. But I think that we all have to take responsibility for everything that happens. It's not just, government, it's us as well, and putting pressure on our...
Public participation, that's, we need to be a more informed community in
Yes.
paying attention to the experts out there, people like myself that are trying to educate and enlighten and then really manifest that into, communicating with our elected leaders to ensure that, we're prioritizing water protection, that, the county health department's practice of grandfathering doesn't continue. It's just flat out wrong and needs to end without delay.
Are you hopeful?
Oh, I'm very hopeful. I'm a very optimistic person, and, relative to my role, I guess I'm very tenacious as well, and
Yes,
the county
you are.
certainly knows
I
it.
see you all the time on the board meetings.
I've put enough time to inform myself on this issue, and again, based on my training and then obviously the information gathering, I feel strongly that this is unlawful activity that needs to stop, and let's hope the towns step up collectively, and let's hope our legislator, Ms. Fleming, certainly communicates to her colleagues in Hauppauge, and we do things differently out of the health department's shop.
Well, Don Quixote,
Okay.
thank you very much for
Thank you.
coming. We certainly learned something, and we need to go on.
Till you get windmills, right? Yeah. Yes.
Well, we got to save East Hampton. That's my role in life, saving
Absolutely.
East
Yes.
Hampton. I can't save the world, but maybe
Yeah.
I can save East Hampton,
Yes.
because I love it here. I love swimming in that
Likewise.
beautiful bay. I call it Phyllis's Bay, no more Gardener's Bay. Phyllis's Bay.